Hey everyone, it's time for another edition of Beaver Banter.
Beaver Sports Talk lives here.
It is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner. Ian over there. And Ian, we are joined once again with Bemidji Pioneer Sportswriter Alex Faber joining on the podcast once again to talk a little basketball. So Alex, welcome back onto the pod.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I'm glad you guys didn't pick me coming on after the Ferris series because I might have had to pop on my Ferris State hat, but I'll leave that alone. I'll leave that alone for now. But yeah, good to be back.
Yeah, I forget that that's the region of the country that you hail from originally. Yep. So that was brutal. I was up there for that series, and a very stark contrast in 2 weekends for that hockey team. I'll tell you that much. But
a lot can change in a week.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we got some basketball to talk about. Men's and women's both in full swing. Women's are not maybe making the push we hoped that they would maybe make towards that 12 seed in the NSIC tournament, but the men have won 4 of their last 5, so we figured we'd get Alex back on and talk a little late season basketball with both of these teams headed towards hopeful NSIC tournament berths.
Yeah, so Alex, kind of what, just tell us, Bemidji's rattling off a few wins here for men's basketball, kind of feeling like they're getting into a groove. I guess the biggest question just is, what's been the change? What have you noticed in the team over the last few weeks that's kind of had them playing a little better basketball, or at least having that show in the win column?
Yeah, so they're I'm naturally a bit of a pessimist, so I'll look at the maybe not as super positive aspect of it is the 3 teams that they are on a winning streak against right now are the bottom 3 teams in the NSIC, right? So I guess to contextualize it, they're not going out and beating Minnesota State. But with that being said, they're taking care of business. They are playing better. And I think it's a combination of things. I think number one, the most clear and obvious answer is you've got John Sutherland, and he appears to be healthy now. And he's just rattling off points. He's doing more of what you kind of expected going into the year, right? Like I think he made his first regular season appearance in December after missing, all of November. And then he had another gap where he was injured again. He kind of had to step away, but now he's back. And now it seems like they're kind of figuring some things out, right? Figuring out the lineup, figuring ways to play. And I think the second biggest thing is kind of they're getting guys to figure out roles. They're figuring out who's the best guards. They're figuring out, whereas the lineups right now look very different than they did 2 months ago. And when you have as many transfers as they did, it kind of makes sense. But it seems like they're kind of settling into, okay, we know what guys can kind of do now. Yeah,
the Sutherland injury, like I said, he just won, was it forward of the week or player of the week in the NSIC this week? I can't remember what it was.
NSIC player of the week, yep.
NSIC player of the week, right. And so having him back and cooking at his highest level, it seems, again, is obviously a big benefit. And like you said, it's not been against the best talent in the NSIC. Like you said, these 3 wins have come against the bottom 3. And even before that, if you look at 4 of their last 5, Sioux Falls currently sits, I believe, in 10th place in the NSIC. So they haven't been exponentially terrific wins. But with that being said, there is some opportunity here at the end of the year to try to get some of those and really make yourself feel better about where this team's at. And I think I said it a couple of weeks ago. It's just like, if anything else here, maybe you're not going to improve your standing. Maybe you're still going to go in as, an away team for the first round, which looks increasingly likely now. Just there's so many games in between them and that cutoff for 8th place. But if anything else, just stack some wins and stack some momentum and start feeling better about yourself, because in a 1-game tournament, even going on the road, sure, it's going to be probably a pretty good environment. But if you get in there and get 1 win on the road, you're back in the Pentagon for the first time in 2 seasons. So that would be a huge plus. And, they got Augustana coming up this next Friday, and then Wayne State. Those are 2 winnable games for a team who was pegged to be pretty high in the preseason standings in the NSIC. So yeah, what are you looking for here over the last stretch of 4 games for this team to continue doing that's really worked well for them?
Yeah, you pointed out you said it right there when you said, like, it's important to kind of get the vibes right a little bit, because it just felt like things were off a little bit. And, guys were banged up. John Sutherland obviously being the most obvious example, but it just felt like there wasn't a lot of rhythm with the team. And when things were going right, then John Sutherland's out again, right? So it just feels like they're getting more comfortable, and I think kind of increasing that comfort and maybe getting guys more comfortable. I mean, a guy who's been really surprising for me all year and really seems to be settling into his role is John Pekarich over Brainerd kid. He's really settled into a role like the first, I think I mentioned it last time I was on here just briefly, and that was back in November, I think, and it was just kind of like, well, it's fun to see him come off and hit some triples and kind of be a nice off the bench kind of guy, but let's see if it lasts during the season. And it really has. I mean, all season long, he's coming off and now he's starting. He's just a guy that can reliably score. I mean, it seems like every game. And what's impressing me too is I don't remember if it was the last win or the win before that. He only hit like a couple triples or three, and he can also score at the rim now. It feels like he's kind of evolving as a scorer. And I think a guy like that and getting guys like that a little more comfortable in the role. Jalen Patterson kind of playing guard a little bit off the bench is helping. Tate Olson, when I've talked to Coach Boshi about Tate Olson, what he's really hammered on is consistency, right? The junior guard, there are times where he flashes. Now I'm kind of surprised if I don't look at the stat sheet for a game or watch a game and he doesn't have a double-double. He's a guy that's contributing on both ends of the court, and when he's on, and he's a consistent basket. He might not put up the point total of a guy like Sutherland, who's always going to be near the top, or even a guy like JP, who's going to nail a bunch of triples and rack up the points. But he's always going to have a double-double for you, it seems, and his consistency. Daxton Daly, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him. He can grab boards too. He's a big rebounder and he can score too. And he's a little lengthy. He's athletic. That's a guy you want to be playing well. So I think it's kind of that idea of more consistency and just getting a little more comfortable and figuring out the bench too, because there are guys who have flashed on the bench. Jarian Mayo hasn't been, putting himself on the stat sheet of late, I guess is a way to put it. But he's really showed flashes out the year too, where he can come off the bench and be a really reliable, guard to kind of guide the offense. So maybe figuring out the bench role, I think, is pretty key. A guy who's kind of surprising me again is another sophomore is Isaac Sieverts, former BHS guy. He's playing decent minutes lately, and he's coming in and he scored like a career high 6 points a couple weeks ago at the last game I was at. And I talked to Coach after. I'm like, well, are we going to see more of this guy? And he was kind of like, well, I mean, he's got a good motor. He doesn't take stupid shots. He comes in and defends. He's athletic. We could use that right now. And they have used it for 3 weeks. So I think settling into the benches specifically, but just kind of, I don't know, as a whole, it's a little general, but just getting a little more chemistry with the team and have guys continue to lean into those roles that are, have them on a little bit of winning streak right now.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned that. Like, everybody kind of has to find out their role. Every team needs a guy to come off the bench, play defense, and get some rebounds. Everybody needs, that secondary scorer on the team, and it's figuring out who that roles are, because especially when Sutherland was hurt, everybody kind of had to move up that totem pole and play a little bit out of their element, and now that he's back, they're able to kind of get some time around there. And you mentioned a lot of those guys. I mean, you mentioned sophomores or somebody like Olsen who's in his third year, but also, again, this is kind of like these seasons are the most minutes that they've logged in their careers. And so now they're finally consistently, Division II basketball players, and it's seeing that jump take up and seeing Pekarich take the scoring element, and it's seeing Olsen kind of figure out the rebounding part and using his long range and his arms to kind of figure stuff out. And it's really interesting, that they've kind of all started to find in that role. And now it feels like you have the crew. Kind of what are some of the things that you've seen out of this team, I guess, over the next few weeks that kind of, projecting forward, I guess would be the way that make you kind of look and you go, hey, you know what? I'm not saying this team can win the NSIC, but this team can be a pain for whichever team they're playing because they can do this.
I want to see them put together two halves against a really good team. There have been a lot of games I've covered this year where they go into the locker room, they're down by 2, they're leading a lot of the time, even against some really good squads. MSU Moorhead a couple weeks ago, right? Like, They have put together really good halves. It just seems like for whatever reason there's some choppiness in the second, or something goes wrong and they kind of let it spiral. So, the next few weeks, if they can put together a couple games where it's even if they don't win, if it's a good squad, and they put together two halves and it ends up being like a 5-point game or they end up winning, that's something where I'm going to be like, okay, kind of keep an eye on this team. That's a team you wouldn't want to play who's finally figuring things out at the right time. I mean, because that's what That's why we love college basketball, right? It's all about when you put it together. And if they put it together end of February, early March, and they're proving that they can play consistently against teams, and guys are fitting into the roles like we talked about, a few minutes ago. Like that's what I'm going to be looking for. It's just consistency.
Another huge thing over these last 6 games, this team is shooting, all things considered, lights out from beyond the 3-point arc, considering where they were on the season. And this is including these last 6 games. They're shooting 34.6% from behind the 3-point line. The last 6 games, however, 43%, 48%, 44%, 47%, 44%. That's pretty good over this stretch to be able to increase your 3-point percentage that much, especially because there were some games earlier this season. They shoot a lot of threes. For a team that has, maybe you could say, a weakness, they're still 12th in the NSIC in terms of overall 3-point percentage. It seems like they shoot quite a few of them, and it just whatever it is, whether they just maybe have been playing a little bit less competition lately, that could have something to do with it. Maybe, not getting closed out on as hard, but 3-point shooting has definitely helped this team over this last 6 games where they've looked pretty good offensively.
Yeah, a game that I go back to was they were playing number 15 Southwestern Minnesota State, the Mustangs. Mm-hmm. And first half competitive. It's a really good team. That's a high octane offense. And it's kind of the thing we were talking about earlier, right, where they put up a good first half and kind of falter in the second. But I talked to Boshi after, and one of the main things he said was, we just need to shoot the 3 better, right? And that was a couple of weeks ago. And like you said, that seems to be kind of figuring that out, because we know what Pekarich can do. We know what he can do off the in the starting lineup. But when guys like Tate Olson and Malang Athian too, when he's kind of a multi-level scorer too, a guy I failed to mention, and he's been killing it too at times. He can really pop off, and I don't know, like, it really is big, the 3-point shooting too. Yeah, and finding that across the roster and not just having role guys do it, have guys be able to kind of every guy score at every level it's gonna unlock the offense a little bit.
Yeah, and especially, with the tournament coming up, the competition's only going to get better and better. I know they've had an opportunity to string some wins together, albeit, like you said, some teams that are bottom of the conference. But again, using this as an opportunity to kind of stack some wins together and to kind of get things on the right track for the postseason. Right now, they sit at 10-14. You're looking at some of the games that they have left on the schedule. They have Augustana. They have Wayne State. Those are, not that those colleges or anything to sniff at, but you do have an opportunity here to kind of once again pick some stuff off here. But then you play Concordia St. Paul and you play University of Minnesota Duluth. But that Concordia St. Paul one especially, do you kind of see that as kind of like the gauge of like, we're really going to see how well this team is playing on that February 21st matchup?
Yeah, especially because it's coming at such a pivotal time, right? And if you look at earlier in the schedule too, they traveled to Concordia St. Paul, I think in mid-January, and that was a close game. I think it ended up only being like a 2-point loss, right? That was something where it was really close. So you kind of go in with the, hey, we're finding a little bit of heat. We played this team close earlier. If we can get this win at home, that's the kind of thing where I think you're feeling pretty good if you're Boshi, and especially if, like we're saying, like I've been hammering on, if you do it with a little bit of consistency too, I think that's a measuring stick game where you can be like, okay, postseason right around the corner, we're playing the kind of the brand of ball that we want to, I guess.
Yeah, and it's you brought up that game, and there's been several of those this year that have honestly been really, really close games against some of the top teams in the NSIC. The Concordia game was within 2 points. That MSU Moorhead game, they're kind of in the middle of the pack in the conference, but historically over the last few years, they've been really, really good. That was a game right up until the end. They took number 20 Minot State to basically the end of the game and then kind of let that one slip away as well. They've had opportunities to get these marquee wins this year. And it's just not quite put together at the end of the game. Like you said, Alex, putting 2 halves together, being consistent, such a big thing. They were leading St. Cloud State down in Hollenbeck Hall just a couple of weeks ago at halftime. Granted, it's only by 1, and basketball is a sport that you can put a run together pretty quickly. So a 1-point lead is not to say, oh, we blew it, we should have had them for sure. But yeah, being a little bit more consistent and hopefully, like CJ said, this weekend is a little bit easier in terms of where the record is. It's kind of down right around where BSU is, but Augustana, I think, beat you by like 25 the first time they played you this season, even though you have identical records right now in the NSIC.
And that was one where they shot the three incredibly. That was like crazy, wasn't it, Alex? Like, they just couldn't miss.
So. Yeah. That was just one of those ones where it's like, okay, what do you even do?
Yeah, Augustana had 98 points, and they shot 54% from the field, 53% from 3-point range, 17 of 32 on the game. Yeah, they just shot the lights out. So if you can stop them from doing that, you probably have a better chance in this game. But yeah, I think, like I said, just for this team, put together some solid results here. Next weekend is going to be more pivotal than this one. Like Alex said, you're at home to wrap the season up, at least the regular season. You're playing the top team right now anyways in the NSIC in Concordia St. Paul, and then Minnesota Duluth, who is, I believe, still in the hunt for one of those top 4 seeds. Yeah, they're only a game back, or a half game back actually, from Minot State right now. So they're still very much in the thick of it. And those teams are going to be hungry when they come to the BSU gymnasium. So yeah, like Alex said, just put together some more solid performances, stack up as many wins as you can. And even if you don't get a home, playoff game, just try to go in and get some momentum and be playing your best basketball at the right time.
Well, and the other thing too to note is that this upcoming weekend, like in terms of like, if you lose, it's whatever. If you win, it's whatever. Nobody's gonna be like, whoa, they're eye opening. But the fact is that Augustana and Bemidji State currently have the same record. They're both 7-11 in the NSIC. And if Bemidji State could get a win and then go play Wayne State's 8-10. So then you're right there and have a chance to kind of, now, maybe leapfrog isn't the right word, but you really have a chance to put yourself in good position. And, if that last weekend doesn't go your way, maybe it doesn't matter. But there's a chance where Bemidji State at the end of the weekend, if they were to sweep, does put themselves in a much better spot for that final weekend of the year in terms of position.
Yeah, and there were times this year where I would, take a look at the NSIC standings and, during those rough stretches, if they were right neck and neck, it seemed like it was going towards the other team pretty consistently. So again, that's another kind of measuring stick idea where you look at like, can we beat the teams that are kind of around us now? Can we kind of climb the ladder a little bit? Kind of that idea, when you're not near the top of the standings, not looking for the Final Four, can we at least kind of shuffle some things up, play a little better? And another thing too to mention is I was, just looking at the schedule and, they lost a couple of times to teams they probably shouldn't have, like these teams right now, right? And they played them pretty close. Like even when they won, they only won, thin margins. So the fact that they are taking care of business and doing it kind of handedly too, like both of those games were, 2 out of 3 of those games were not super close that they've won, right? Like some of those they've went into halftime with kind of really ridiculous leads. So it's not like they're, eking out wins. They're like, okay, we are comfortably the better team. So again, it is kind of a good point there that is going to be a big measuring stick, because if you can kind of say, okay, now we're comfortably better than you, person who's right above you, you kind of just keep stacking those to March.
Yeah. Big lead over Crookston at the half of 22 points.
Yep.
They led Mary by 8, and then Northern kind of made a run towards the end of the first half. I was watching that game as close as I could. On Saturday this last weekend. They made a run, but BSU did have a 19-point lead, I think, at one point in the first half. And then that kind of got a little close at the end, but fortunately the Beavers were able to hit their free throws and make good defensive plays and make sure that game did not get any closer than it did. And I went into that one, I was a little bit like, okay, Northern, they just got their first conference win of the season. I don't know if it was the night before playing us, but it was the game before they played us. So I'm like, oh gosh, they're going to come in here on a hot streak and get their second. But BSU was able to take care of business. And like you said, Alex, it's been pretty handedly. I mean, that Minnesota Crookston game, it only ended up being a 15-point score, but I mean, it was dominant in that first half. And then a lot of that just comes down to, all right, take your foot off the gas a little bit. We're trying not to over overextend and get any injuries here that would derail this success that we found here late in the season. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm getting pretty jazzed up for this tournament run because, like we said, it's basketball. With hockey, it's like, all right, cool. Let's say the BSU men's hockey team can put together another couple wins. Maybe they sweep Bowling Green in a couple of weeks, and then they split with Mankato on the last weekend of the season. Great. They're going into the first round with a lot of momentum, but they have to win a 3-game series. With basketball, it's 1 game, winner take all. You can get into that tournament and do a lot more damage than somebody who has to play a series like that, even if it is just 3 games. So I'm pretty excited for this end of the season here. Hopefully they can go on the road to Sioux Falls and Wayne this weekend and keep that momentum rolling. That would be super awesome to see.
Yeah, and like you mentioned from the top too, like this was a team that had a little bit of expectations coming in. So it's not like it's a team that was picked near the basement, getting a little hot near the end. You could argue that it's a team kind of finding level water and finding where they kind of expected to be. So if they play up to the expectations of heading into the season, one of the top half teams, anything can kind of happen in March, right? Especially if you have those expectations. You have players that you were pretty comfortable with going into the season. If they start playing well, and if you start playing up to that kind of expectation, who knows?
Right, exactly. And Bemidji State was able to do this a couple of years ago. They finished the season, they rattled off that huge winning streak. It was the first year we did the podcast. Like around this time of year, they rattled off a huge winning streak to end the regular season. They went into postseason play. They got a home playoff game at the beginning. Then they went to the Pentagon. They got a big win early. And then they, of course, lost on the buzzer beater to Moorhead in the semifinal game. But there was that, I remember, Ian, we were talking about that team had a chance to get to the conference championship game. When you get there, I mean, anything can happen. So, yeah, I think this team obviously is strong. This team can obviously do some stuff, and you just have to kind of wait until you get to that point and see what happens. But, I mean, overall, this is a team, like you said, that came into the year with some expectations. They were hurt, and you can say, it's a combination of a little underperforming, but a lot of, they weren't hurt. They didn't quite nestle into their roles. And now that they finally figured themselves out, like you said, Alex, they are kind of becoming that team that they want to be. So as we kind of move this conversation a little bit here, and then we'll talk some girls basketball and women's basketball, got high school sports on the brain in a second. And we'll talk a little bit. First, though, your first year on the beat for Bemidji State men's and women's basketball, you pretty much been in the BSU gymnasium. Have you had a chance to travel kind of throughout the conference this year?
Not in hoops. No, not in hoops yet. We're sticking around here for now, but a lot of high school, been traveling for a lot of high school ball lately. Like I think tomorrow I'm actually heading up to North Kellier. Then I went over to Cass Lake to catch Cass Lake Red Lake game. So honestly, my travel's been mostly with the prep hoops there.
Been traveling all over luxurious Highway 2 for a little bit of them. But where's the farthest high school game you've gone? How far has Jared made you go?
I think the farthest is just Cass Lake, which is not that far, which is like 20 minutes, I think. So
wait until playoff time. That's when you're because Cass Lake's we're switching to high school for a second here. Cass Lake's they're a pretty nice team. They're expected to win their section, aren't they?
Yeah, they've got Gabby Fine-Day, future, BSU student over there. So she's when you have a player like that of that caliber, kind of anything can happen in the postseason. So yeah, I'm expected to make probably a few trips up to Thief River come March.
Right, exactly. You'll get to maybe go down to the state tournament, get to cover a game at the barn or something like that. That'd be kind of cool. But what's it been like? Your impression of NSIC men's and women's basketball this year?
It's pretty fun. My favorite is, I love when teams get a little choppy with each other, a little feisty. And I love just seeing that at this level too. I forget what team it was a couple weeks ago. There was some John on the floor, and I just like that. Just the competitive nature of every game. It could be just a random Saturday, and maybe it's in Bemidji, so half the time there's a snowstorm outside. So maybe a little bit of an empty barn, but these guys are still kind of hooping like they're in front of 10,000 people, and John like they're in front of 10,000 people. So it's just been fun kind of watching the energy, I guess, on the court. And the fun part is you're at the BSU gymnasium. So you are I know you're up top, but you are still pretty close to the action because it's not a big gym. So you can hear a lot of stuff. You see a lot of stuff. You're right close and personal. I saw a lot of games
right on the floor at the scorers table, you find that I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, it's just Division II, whatever, but those guys can move, those guys can hoop, and it's NSIC is, for volleyball, I think we can comfortably say it's like the best volleyball conference in the country, or like pretty high up there. But, when you have the defending men's and women's, as much as I hate to give Mankato anything, when you have the defending men's and women's champions both in your conference, it's a pretty good, and with all the ranked teams they have this year in conference, it's, Bemidji State's not had an easy run throughout their schedule too. I think we also had to kind of look at it that way.
Yeah, that too. And just kind of, it's always fun too, seeing kind of like maybe an undersized guy come in and just kind of nail like 3 straight triples or something like that, and just kind of show you why maybe he was overlooked, quote unquote, for like some D1 stuff. But that's super fun too, is you never know what kind of talent you're going to get on any given night, or what kind of players. So sometimes it's like guy who's pretty big for the NSIC, like a center who's kind of a monster, and that's always fun to watch, or just a guard who's a little short but can shoot it. So it's also just kind of a varied of talent too. It's a mix of everything.
All right. Yeah. Ian, sorry, I kind of cut you off there. Anything else? Otherwise we'll shift to women's basketball.
No, not much. I've just been sitting here glancing at the 2022 season, 22-23, like you brought up, and wondering what could have happened if that shot for Moorhead didn't go in at the buzzer in the
Dude, I was so confident that Bemidji State was going to win the conference that year. It's like, get us into one game. We could beat anybody right now. We're the best team in the conference. And then just a buzzer beater. I just sank. Like I was
Yeah, Duluth would have been a tough out. I think that would have been their matchup in the championship game that year, but they were pretty close too to the tournament, like the NCAA field too. And like you looked at where the at-large bids were, like right after that, and it's like, man, yeah, if we could have gotten that win over Moorhead, who was receiving votes, and then maybe, I mean, obviously, if they win the conference tournament, I believe that is still an automatic berth. So, but they would have been pretty close with that win. So, an exciting season, and hopefully they can make another run like that.
So let's shift things over now to women's basketball. Obviously, the expectations are a little bit different, kind of expecting to kind of work through some things, see who they have for the future. But, what's kind of been your interpretation of the women's team this year when things are going well for them on the floor? What's typically been happening for them this season?
It's usually Tyrion Plash is a player that really sticks out to me when she's playing well. She is arguably, the best pure scorer on the team, I would say. She can just shoot the 3 ball so well. And there are some games where, like, when they've caught fire a little bit and they found some momentum, I mean, a lot of times she's driving the offense too. So it's a lot of the times it's like individual players kind of stepping up in different roles. Rachel Koenig too, when she's on, she can really guide them places. I think she just scored like 19 points the other night. So a thing that sticks out to me that coach said way earlier in the season was, we don't have a girl yet who really we can rely on as the go-to scorer, right? Like that was pretty early in the season. She said that, but she was kind of like, oh, we don't really, I don't know if we have that type of person yet. And when they win and when they're good, it seems like that's what happens, right? Is there is someone that can kind of take over. And Tyrion Plash, Rachel's one, Ella, big center there. When she can take over too in the 5 spot. So it's just tough. They've had some inconsistency and stuff, but when they're consistent and when they have a couple of options that are kind of on their game that night, it seems like that's when they're finding success.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just been a lot of times, you glance over the box score and you watch snippets of the games here and there. And it's just, to me, it's the outside shooting and shooting in general some nights where it's just like they go ice cold for stretches and they'll have that one bad quarter. I know a couple years ago, CJ and I made a note of just like, there's always just seems to be one quarter that they just really implode in, and it makes it impossible to stay competitive in these games. And that seems to be, unfortunately, what's popped up here this season. But they're doing fine. I think that they're not well below expectation. Obviously, they didn't have many expectations going into the season, but it's been about, where we expected they would be. They've picked up some wins that we thought they wouldn't, and they've unfortunately lost some games we were hoping that they could maybe steal one here and there. But yeah, it's just, that's the thing to me that really sticks out sometimes, is just that they can just go ice cold from the field, unfortunately. And against some of these good defensive teams at the top of this conference, it's a killer.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate thing too. Is so if there's a game that I'm covering something else, it's a road game, and I don't watch, I'm usually the guy who writes the recaps rather than Jared for those. And I feel like a lot of the time it's just that. I think my latest recap I wrote, third quarter, they were just trailing by 4, and third quarter comes around, things just get a little loose. The offense seems to stick a little bit, and maybe they have a little bit harder time kind of generating that rhythm. So, again, basketball is a game of consistency. We talked about it with the men's team. They struggled with a little bit at putting halves together, but for the women's team, it seems like they just struggle in a quarter, or like there's a portion of the game where things kind of get out of hand. And then, you can make a run in the fourth quarter, but if you're down by 17, entering the fourth quarter, that's just about impossible to overcome, right? So that's another, I think that's one of the biggest issues, I guess, is finding that consistency. And that makes sense though, when you're a younger team, right? Like I just talked about, arguably the best scorer on the team, one of them, Tieran Plash, she's a sophomore. Rachel is a junior. But a lot of these players are a little bit younger, so I think that's kind of growing pains a little bit. And like you said, that was kind of the expectations this season, right? Installed a new offense, a lot of younger girls, a lot of girls with talent too, but just kind of finding success, maybe just feeling out playing at D2, I guess, and finding that consistency.
So what kind of projecting forward, like we talked about with the men's team, and maybe this is a different way of projecting forward, but with the women's team this year, you've kind of already touched on a little bit, but just kind of looking forward into next year, maybe kind of the next couple of years, kind of developing a nucleus with this team. Do you feel like that part is kind of gelling together? Like, hey, they've maybe found a girl here who can be a nice player for them in this role for years to come. And kind of what does that look like for you with this team going forward based on what you've seen so far this year?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of selling the plan and keeping these girls around, right? Keeping Tieran Plash and a freshman who's really stuck out, who's been in the starting lineup consistently this year, has been Aubrey Hare. And she can rebound. She's versatile. I've seen her play the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4. I mean, she's like a natural guard, but she was kind of playing at forward this year a little bit. So she's super versatile. She's just a freshman. And you can kind of see them developing some chemistry, and it's just about keeping them together, I guess, and ensuring that there aren't transfers, and ensuring that kind of buy into the plan, buy into the development, because Aubrey was good at the beginning of the season. She's developed. Tieran was good at the beginning of the season. She's developed. So I think it's just kind of keeping them and kind of the trust the plan kind of thing, trust the process with the 76ers, hopefully with a better ending. But that's kind of the idea with them, I guess, is, you have talented younger underclassmen. Just make sure they stick around and kind of continually kind of buy into this new offensive system they installed this year, buy into, what Stoltenberg wants them to do kind of thing. So just kind of that buy-in, I guess, is the key for me.
Yeah, we mentioned a couple of weeks ago with the women's hockey program, who is in a similar spot where they're, struggling at the bottom of the conference. And Jared wrote a piece and brought up the fact that after a loss to Minnesota State, I believe it was, they were disappointed with the performance. And it kind of signified to him a little bit of a jump forward in expectations, if nothing else, where, in years past, maybe this team is just like, well, we won an overtime game and we lost the next game. That's about what we expect. And now the expectation has shifted in that locker room towards the fact that now they're looking for more than just 2 points on the weekend. And hopefully this women's program, like you said, they're really young, and it's hard, especially in today's landscape, to keep a core around, especially if things aren't going well. But, it is what it is. And we'll see them get back, I'm sure, sooner or later to that kind of pre-COVID form, CJ. I'll never forgive COVID for what it took from us. That the basketball program on the women's side was starting to round into shape right before that happened. And they just haven't quite recovered from it yet. But hopefully greener pastures are to come. They're sitting a little bit behind right now. If you look at a standings perspective, they are 2 games out of the NSIC tournament berth area. And it's tough because I think Northern State was kind of one of those teams, or not Northern, maybe it was the game before that. Crookston, it was definitely one of those teams where you're like, man, if we can pick up this win and now we're only a game behind, we can maybe sneak into that field. But, it's still 4 games left, and they got some good teams on that schedule. If anything else, Augustana sitting right above them in the standings. Maybe go out there, pick up a win on the road in Sioux Falls. That would be awesome to see. But yeah, what are your kind of expectations here for the last 4 weeks for this team?
You brought up that Minnesota Crookston loss, and that was a tough one. Like you said, you're hoping to kind of pick that one up, and that was one where in the fourth quarter, that's the quarter where it kind of, it was close, and then Crookston kind of just took control. So I don't even know necessarily. I'm sure internally that they told me at the beginning of the year they want to get back to the Pentagon. That was very clear, right? But kind of as a measuring stick for the program, I guess, I think it's probably still more kind of individual growth, right? Like if you lose a game, but Tieran Plash played lights out, shot well from behind, beyond the arc, and Aubrey Hare continues to develop, and some of these younger people kind of get in. Ashlyn Genther too. There was a stretch there where it seemed like she lost her confidence in her shot a bit, but it seems to have come back. So those are the kind of things you look for in a season like this: is Ashlyn getting her confidence back, Plash shooting well from beyond the arc. So internally, I'm sure the expectation is let's keep, we want to get to the Pentagon. Let's win these. But I guess from an outsider's perspective, I would say I would just keep looking towards the development of the people who you think are going to stick around, especially some of those sophomores. I would imagine they've been here their freshman year. I would imagine they are probably going to stick around, right? But making sure Aubrey sticks around with them as a freshman, make sure she feels comfortable in that core. I mean, she's been in the starting lineup all season long. So it's, you're reading between the lines. It's pretty clear she's a part of that kind of future. But I think just kind of following along individual players is my expectation, and seeing what they do, in a stretch where you might not even make the tournament. You're struggling to get there, but can we still put together some solid performances? Can we maybe find, we talked about the men, maybe find some consistency and make that push?
All right, Alex, great to have you on. Ian, anything else about men's or women's basketball that or otherwise that we want to press Alex on while we got him here?
No, not too much else that I want to grill him on. Honestly, I think we've gained a good amount of information. It's nice to have somebody on that is able to follow them a lot more consistently. I do admit that I'll spend most of my Fridays and Saturdays watching the struggling hockey programs right now. Of course, this weekend was awesome, but yeah, it's been a rough season. It's been one of the rough winters that we've had. So hopefully at the end here, this is going to start signifying the spring. These teams are starting to wake up out of their hibernation of the winter, and these Beavers are hopefully going to go on a run in the postseason.
Alex, where can people find you? Where can people find your work? Just kind of what's the way to be able to consume all the good stuff that you're putting out there about Bemidji State men's and women's basketball and some of the prep stuff like you talked about?
Yeah, so Alex Pick Faber is my Twitter handle. I usually tweet out my game recaps and such on there, but if you want to make sure, if I don't, BemidjiPioneer.com, go to the sports tab, and we have it dedicated to college sports. You can find, all things Beavers there. And I think that's 1 and 2 for me.
All right, perfect. Alex Faber, a Bemidji Pioneer sports writer, joining us here on the Beaver Banter podcast to talk a little men's and women's basketball. Alex, great to have you back on. And hopefully come tournament time, one of the teams will make a little move here, and then we can have you back on talking about that.
Absolutely. Would love to come on.
Always great to have Alex on the program. Alex Faber, Bemidji Pioneer. Great to have him on and talking about that stuff. And now we shift gears to hockey, where Ian, Bemidji State men's hockey had what can only be described as their best series of the season. And you know what? For all of the things that have gone wrong this season, for all the things that have made us, for all of the Ferris States and the Northern Michigan series out there, if there was a weekend to just go up and play spoiler and just ruin a team's weekend, I think Bemidji State picked a good one to do it going on the road.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I think you probably have to say this is like, it's by far best conference weekend. It's hard to say that I think the second ever time that they beat UND in a series, and a very competitive series where you split with a top 3 team in pairwise in Minnesota.
Yes.
Those are probably a little bit better just in terms of how
overall
good it was
hockey
for the program and overall hockey, like you said. But this is more fun because you won both games. And yes, I know it's a fake woke win in overtime and you don't get all 6 points. So it's not a true sweep.
Man against wall.jpg.
Yeah, but I'm not going to complain about it, man, at all. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, we'll see if that 1 point where And we'll talk about what happened on Saturday to lead to them dropping that point, which was unfortunate, but a very, very good weekend to stop beating around the bush for Bemidji State. To start on Friday and the 5-3 victory where the Beavers really just like kind of kicked ass, man. I mean, it really didn't start until midway through the second period. And Noah Quinn got the game rolling. Noah Quinn had a fantastic weekend this weekend. I believe he had 2 goals. Now I think he has 3 on the season and 4 in his career. Casper Magnuson assisted on that. He's another fantastic player over the weekend. Eric Martin got one in this later in the second period. Tech answered back early in the third with an Owen Baker goal, and then Yuri Väisänen, Casper Magnuson on the power play, and Jake McLean scored about a minute each apart. It was probably a minute and a half between Väisänen and Magnuson's goal, and then about a half a minute between Magnuson and McLean's goal to go up 5-1. And it's like, okay, cool. Now this is business. We're probably going to win this game. And Tech did score a couple goals late in the game to make it 5-3, a little bit more competitive. And of course, that was big for them because they have their little tournament that they play in the Winter Carnival that they were trying to come back and make it a competitive Saturday game in. It would have been a big, difficult deficit to overcome if they had lost 5-1. So that was always good to see because at the very least, we've talked about BSU's inconsistencies. If they were going to come out and play like, not great on the Saturday, hey, at least we took 3 points from Tech and kind of spoiled their fun in terms of how it looks for them at the top of the conference. But they came out Saturday and they looked pretty good again. I mean, Jared brought it up, I believe, on the CCHA show last week, where this team offensively just cannot find the net and they're not really creating great I don't want to say explosive chances because that's not really a thing, but like it's all just
like
kind of like
high percentage chances. They're not being like efficient with their shots. Yeah.
Right. It's like, okay, let's throw it at Noah West and hope that he gives up a bad rebound. It's like, well, you threw it into his glove, so it's going to be hard for him to give up a bad rebound there. But yeah, it was really good offensively. And like I said, Jared brought it up and he's like, it just feels like this team needs to see a game where the goals, the pucks just go in the net. And I mean, this team scored 11 goals on the weekend. I mean, I have to pull up the Jared tweet to figure out exactly what it was, but it was like in 4 games against Michigan Tech, BSU, and I don't know if it was BSU and Tech. I think it was combined for like 34 goals. And in 8 games between BSU, Lake State, and St. Thomas was the other one. It's like they scored 32 goals. So it's all low scoring games against St. Thomas and Lake State. And against Tech, it's just like there's no defense in the building. But yeah, 6-5. There was problems on Saturday, and there was special teams was very polarizing over the weekend, man. Their special
to say the
teams
least.
Their power play unit was a buzzsaw, and their penalty kill unit was whatever the opposite of a buzzsaw is.
It was a buzzsaw in the opposite way. Yeah.
They're trying to
they
cut
made
down
the other
a tree with a plastic knife, like that's your penalty.
It's like
kill.
one of those like knives they use like for like plays and stuff like that, where like retracts in. So every time you put pressure on it, just goes back in, just goes like the knife handle. Yeah.
So back to Friday then for the BSU's power play went 1 for 4. That's pretty good. 25%. You'll take that. Their penalty kill went 1 for 2, which is 50%. That's obviously pretty bad, but 1 game sample size, whatever. You bounce to Saturday, a total of 11 goals in the game, 6-5. And it just went back and forth. I tweeted out that Michigan Tech, I have never seen them score a talented goal against Bemidji State, dude. There were so many cheesy goals for Michigan Tech this weekend. I cannot believe how many of these things just like, the puck just happened to be on his stick at the right time, and it goes into the net. Oh, yeah, that one bounced off the stanchion like super weird.
Like the golf ball from Space Jam. The puck just kind of moves its way.
Exactly.
The most godforsaken ways to get into the net.
So Tech took a 1-0 lead with a power play goal. Alexi Sylvester Sylvester or Silvestri. I can't remember the pronunciation of that, but he scored his first career goal for the Beavers and tied it up. Casper Magnuson added a beautiful power play goal just a minute later. Or I'm sorry, like 20 seconds later after that goal. Max Coscaperti got a power play goal. Noah Quinn got a power play goal, and it's 3-2 Beavers heading into the second period. Tech scored the only goal of the second period, making it 3-3, and then the third period was just as wild with a power play goal from Casper Magnuson, his second of the night and third of the weekend. And then Elias Janssen for Michigan Tech answered with a power play goal of his own. Jackson Panzer added a goal late in the game to make it 5-4, and you kind of were like, oh, cool. This is it. We're going to get 6 points. We're going to sweep Tech on their home ice. And then it's more of the same. BSU takes a penalty late. They can't clear the puck out of the zone. And it's just they've got to be one of the worst teams at hitting an empty net in all of college hockey. I believe they've done it one time, and it was the win they got over North Dakota, not Minnesota. I think that's the only time they've actually hit an empty net. And it's not like they haven't had chances. I think they've had several chances.
They've had a lot of chances to put games away by getting empty nets, and then they allowed a team to tie and they lose points.
They've done it to Tech twice this year, where Tech scores a goal within the last 2 minutes and now within the last 21 seconds to tie the game and send it to overtime. And listen, in the grand scheme of things, this isn't a point that's going to deny you home ice. I think that's a little bit too far out of reach at this point anyways, thanks to your collapses against NMU and Ferris State over the last couple of weeks. But, at the very least, it's a really good weekend for this team to get the results. 5 points out of 6 on the road in Houghton. This is a big rivalry series. Tech's broadcaster said it himself. I mean, these guys have been in very close series. I mean, dating back to that first McNaughton Cup that the Beavers won, Tech was the team, late in the season that BSU swept on in the Sanford Center to really kind of clinch the McNaughton Cup. And every year it seems like we have these big regular season meetings or playoff meetings. I mean, we've been in postseasons where we've played Tech, and of course last year with the Mason Cup championship game, and it was crazy. So yeah, of course, burying the lead, I get talking about all of this with Jackson Jutting, who I did a little ripping on in the Discord for losing like 4 straight faceoffs on that penalty kill at the end of regulation, but he came through in overtime and absolutely buried the game-winning goal. And gave the Beavers the win and their first sweep of the weekend. So yeah, looking at the power play summary for the Beavers, they went 3 for 4 on the power play, which is really good. So what is that? 4 of 6 over the weekend, 67%, but they gave up 4 power play goals on 4 power play chances. So they went 1 of 6 on the penalty kill this weekend. So it just a brutal weekend. I'm sorry, no, we went 25%. So we went 4 of 8, not 5 of 6 or whatever on the power play. Really good special teams weekend and really bad special teams weekend. It just depended on what side of the penalty kill you happen to be on.
Very volatile.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of players scoring a lot of goals. There was a little bit of a controversial call, I guess you could say, in this game that gave Tech a 5-minute major and a game misconduct. That was that Steven Sardarian? Yes, it was, with the contact to the head. And he's one of their better players for Tech. So that was a big loss. And whether or not you want to call that a punch or not, he didn't need to do it. And he put the refs in a position to make a call. And I can imagine that if that had happened to Adam Fleming or anybody on the Beavers, I would be probably just as upset as the Tech fans are. But, it's the name of the game, and like I said, you put the refs in the position to make that call, and they made it. So the Beavers win.
Angles, and they'll find something.
Yeah, Beavers win. Like I said, I think home ice is kind of out of the question right now, CJ. It's unfortunate, but that's kind of the bed it's the bed you've made, and now you've got to lay in it type of situation. So. You're looking at, obviously this is the weekend where things are gonna kind of come back into focus, right? This is Augustana's last weekend of regular season hockey in the CCHA. They just got swept by Minnesota State, so there will be, I shouldn't say there will be no Augustana championship, right? Because Minnesota State still has to play, I believe, 4 conference games. If Augustana sweeps Tech this weekend, they could still be in a position where they can win the conference. There's no doubt about that. But you're picking between Minnesota State winning their 7th McNaughton Cup in 8 years, or whether or not you want the team that's playing on points percentage to win the conference at this point. So, yeah, you spoiled Michigan Tech's party because now they are, barring a sweep, they could get a sweep this weekend and they'd be within 5 points of Minnesota State. So not an impossible gap technically to make up, but for all intents and purposes, you've kind of spoiled their party to win a McNaughton Cup, which is awesome. You spoiled their Winter Carnival. Controversy, by the way, where Casper Magnuson doesn't win Winter Carnival MVP, but does win CCHA Forward of the Week. What are we doing, Tech?
I don't understand. Yeah, I was watching the postgame waiting for the ceremony, and they did not give him the MVP.
3 goals on the weekend, by the way.
What does he got to do? I mean, I don't care. Whoever they gave the MVP to, I don't care. I don't even need to know his name. Maybe you would have played a little better, then there wouldn't be any controversy. But you lost.
I think it was Jansen that got it. But it
doesn't matter. Yeah, brutal, what the heck?
Brutal.
Come on.
In terms of standings right now for the Beavers, it's looking like you're probably in a position where you can hope for 5th, but honestly, just any ground you can make up is going to be better. I kind of just want to avoid Minnesota State in the first round. Not that I'm like more scared of them than I am Augustana or going to Slater Ice Arena, but I know that the online discourse of that series would be much worse if the Beavers were to unsuccessfully upset Minnesota State. So I'd rather just save myself.
We're thinking of how this impacts the Beaver Banter Twitter page's mentions right now. And look, please, for the sake of it, if you're going to play them, you better win.
Yeah, and even moving up is going to be tough because right now, if you look at it from a points perspective, BSU sits at 29, Lake State has 28, and Ferris has 27. The unfortunate part is those teams play each other this weekend. So you're almost maybe hoping that they split so that you're within 2 points of Lake State and you're within 1 point of Ferris State on even games at 22. But then you still have to go out and put up majority points against Bowling Green at home and probably try to get like a split against Minnesota State in Mankato against a team who's going to be playing for they might be a little too far out for an at-large berth right now with pairwise. I'm not sure. But they're going to be playing for a McNaughton Cup for sure, in that final weekend. So you might still have a chance to climb up the standings a little bit. St. Thomas, you're 3 points behind them right now. So that would create a really interesting battle for that 5, 6, 7, 8 range with Northern Michigan officially being eliminated this weekend. But yeah, I mean, I want to save us a little time for women's hockey. But yeah, I guess just keep your eye on that series this weekend between Lake State and Ferris State, because either one of those teams is going to jump you by a considerable margin, or you're going to be within striking distance of both of them, but you'd still have to be up to the task for taking on 2 of the best teams in the conference right now and getting any points you can if you want to avoid that dreaded 8 seed. And honestly, it really depends. There's so much movement that can still happen, but I mean, playing Michigan Tech in the first round doesn't sound so bad to me right now. Obviously, if you want to say the same thing that you say with both the Mankato fans and not wanting to get on the Tech fans side of things, where if you potentially lose that series, it's going to be hell on earth for you to go on the internet too. But I mean, just from a pure hockey perspective, that team is good, not great. You know what I mean? That's a little reference to Joe Sean dissing Minnesota State. So yeah, I'll leave the men's hockey talk at that. I don't know if you have anything to add about this team, but a very fun weekend.
Very, very fun weekend. There are still some issues that have arisen or constantly arisen. The breakaway goals have always kind of been something for Bemidji State this year that they've kind of allowed Michigan Tech to get a goal specifically on Saturday. Those things have still popped up, but much more fun. The offense came alive. It was a very much needed weekend for Bemidji State just to get 2 games in a row of getting points and the majority points on the weekend and everything. Huge for this team. They take a weekend off, so it's not great for the momentum aspect, but late season bye week means that you get to kind of get healthy and make a stretch run here, and you got 4 games that aren't going to be easy, but you have an opportunity to do something with here. Yeah, let's finish here talking about a women's hockey as we try and wrap up the podcast. I know we don't have a ton of time, Ian, but just kind of fill us in here. Overall, how we feeling on the vibes after another weekend of BSU women's hockey?
It's all right. It's about what you expect. You kind of hoped that at some point, maybe, Minnesota Duluth, they dropped some games earlier this year to St. Thomas. You're hoping maybe you could have some of that same fortune. You played pretty well on Friday and only lost 2-0 in a close game there with Minnesota Duluth, top 6 team in the country. And then Saturday you turn around and you get shut out again and go 0-6. And it's another one of those stretches where unfortunately the offense is kind of dried up for this BSU team. They have 1 goal in their last 3 games, and that's just not going to be good enough to win a lot of games in the WCHA, which is a very, very competitive conference, as we all know. However, this coming weekend, you're going to St. Paul to play a team in St. Thomas who you swept earlier this season and took 6 points away from. They are obviously riding high right now. I believe they took points off of Ohio State this weekend. They've taken a sweep. Or no, they took points over Ohio State last weekend. This last weekend, I believe, was St. Cloud that they split with, which is another decent team in this conference, and they swept Minnesota Duluth. So they've put some games together. So if you can go in there and take some more points off St. Thomas, I'd be very happy with that en route to kind of winding down this season. So that's something to look forward to, a St. Thomas team that you've beaten twice this year. But this will be on the road in that St. Thomas Ice Arena, I presume. So another tough weekend. There are no shortages of those in the WCHA.
No, not at all. So, like you talked about, and like we talked about with Alex earlier in the show about women's basketball, where it's like, the postseason is what it is, and the chances of that are what they are, but you still have an opportunity to just end the year feeling good and kind of pushing some positive momentum after Coach 1 of the Frickland era and kind of see where you can go from there. So outside of that, Ian, I think that's it. Any other BSU related things we need to bring up on the show?
Yes. First of all, I just found the Beaver Territory tweet about Casper Magnuson's little point streak. He's been on here. It's not necessarily a point streak as it is. He has 10 points in his last 11 games, a stretch that started New Year's Eve against UMD. And Adam Flamang has 10 points in that 11-game stretch as well. So two players who we talked about it with Jared. We weren't necessarily calling on those two specifically only. It was more of just the team. Those were just 2 names that we brought up by example. And those are 2 people who have stepped into that scoring role over this last stretch, which has been very good to see. So congrats to Casper and Adam for the success they've had, especially over this last weekend. And then tennis played 3 matches over the weekend and unfortunately dropped all 3 of them in Duluth. And then I believe one was in Crookston. So I could be wrong about that, but yeah, tennis was underway. Baseball, I believe, gets started this weekend as well. I don't have the schedule pulled up in front of me, but I do believe they play some games, I guess like Rockhurst or something like that.
Yes, Rockhurst. They got a 4-game series in Kansas City.
That's right. Yep.
And then they go up to Kenosha, Wisconsin. There's no way they're playing these games unless they're inside, but
yeah. We'll see. And then I don't know. Does softball play again this week? Did they have that?
No, they're off for a little bit. They're off
another week or so, probably still. Okay. So spring sports. Here we are. It's -15 out, like we talked about with Alex before we got started today. But
beautiful.
We're playing spring sports out there. They're toughing it out.
We're playing some spring sports here in early February, like everybody planned. One last thing, ending the show, Minnesota Timberwolves owner, or soon to be not owner, Glenn Taylor, losing that little dispute in court for the moment. And just, you hate to see bad things happen to a Mankato alum like Glenn Taylor, distinguished Minnesota State alum, Glenn Taylor. Congratulations, Mavs fans. That guy is one of you. You just get to own one of the worst owners in Minnesota sports. So there you go.
Also, the Chiefs dynasty is dead, people. Let's go. For we arise and rejoice, type of thing.
There's always a Chargers reference.
Got to keep the hating up.
We
Too
snuck another
positive
one.
on this episode. I had to hate something.
Who's got it better than us?
Nobody.